So let's unpack that a little further and look at how the UK media is discussing who is likely to get through and who will not. So the Daily Telegraph, of course, is leading on Boris Johnson, who launched his campaign to become the new leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the new Prime Minister. So they unpack what he has promised. The Financial Times and most other papers also focus on the leadership race, with a warning to the candidates that Britain is unprepared for a no-deal Brexit. So let's look now at the South China Morning Post and what it has to say about what's going on in Hong Kong. It's calling for calm amid the chaos in terms of the protests, and the protests that were very peaceful to begin with that turned into a riot. It discusses that. The Japan Times, on its front page, is expressing the hope that during the Japanese President Shinzo Abe's visit to Iran, he can use the two nations' long and close ties to curb Tehran's nuclear program and prevent international oil sanctions. The Guardian, on its front page, is covering a report that's predicting that by 2040, most meat will come from plant-based products and not from animals themselves. And then finally, the Times has a little story on its front page which looks at a breakthrough in an artificial intelligence that could solve a particularly irritating problem for railway commuters, and that being the disruption that leaves on the line causes. Technology can solve all problems, it would seem. We've got Cornelia Meyer back as promised to discuss these in more detail. Cornelia, we talked about the leadership race earlier in the programme. The Daily Telegraph has a flattering photo of Boris Johnson on its front page. He's a daily columnist. It is for him, I would say. He's a daily columnist to the Telegraph. It is, you know, the paper is very pro-Boris. Yeah. And their headline is, "Now is the time to remember our duty to the people," a quote from his launch speech. Tell us what the Telegraph is saying today.
Well, basically the Telegraph is talking about the contenders and who the contenders are that have sufficient votes so far, they think, to get through, and they're very pro-Boris, and Boris said he will go for a hard Brexit, for a no-deal Brexit, if there's no other option. It's not his first choice, but he says it would be detrimental to the party, not to the country, to the party, if they kicked the can further down the line. So yes, and as you said, the Telegraph is very pro-Boris, as is the majority of the membership of the Conservative Party, who will have the last say once it's whittled down to do.
Say. Yes. When there's two candidates left, they will cast their vote, as it were, which
and it looks dead certain that he's in. It looks dead certain that he's in.
Well, nothing is certain, as we have learnt from the various elections we've had all around the world and referendum. Nothing is certain, and often the polls do get it wrong.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that he has the ERG, the head of the ERG,
which is the European
research group, which are the Uber-Brexiteers, who are swinging behind him, and they're 80+ people. So, you know, he does have materiality behind him.
Well, let's then look at the Financial Times, which some might argue is not pro-Boris or the other way, but it's talking about the fact that Boris Johnson eases on his no-deal rhetoric, as a leak warns that Britain is unprepared, and this is a leak that the Financial Times, it's a note that it's seen, that is a warning to the Cabinet that actually the UK isn't ready for a no-deal on the 31st of October, and it highlights in particular the pharmaceuticals industry.
Pharmaceutical industry and border controls. It says they need 6 to 8 months to have enough stockpiles for a no-deal Brexit in the on pharmaceutical products, and they need 4 to 5 months to get the borders ready for a no-deal Brexit. So that's pretty bad. And actually, interestingly, though, Boris Johnson said in his speech, and I listened to it yesterday, it was hard to listen to, but I listened to it.
So clearly you're not a fan, then.
I'm not a Brexiteer. I'm a Remainer. But he said we really need to ramp up our preparation for a no-deal Brexit.
So he's saying that, and the Financial Times is saying in its article it's seen this note that was given to the Cabinet. But readers looking at this might think, hang on a second, Why are we not ready? Because we were going to exit at the end of March. Then we were going to exit in the middle of April. But actually, the pharmaceuticals industry has had plenty of time to get ready for this.
But a lot of this is not just the pharmaceuticals industry, it's also the NHS. And remember, every time we got closer to a deadline, the government ramped up its no-deal Brexit preparation. And every time they kicked the can down the bucket, they ramped it down.
So many might argue, why are government departments therefore not ready for a no deal, given the fact that we've been on the edge of one already twice?
I'm with you, but it's not the mandarins that are deciding this, it's the politicians. And what do you do if you're the permanent secretary and your minister says, now go easy on this? You have to go easy on it.
Let's move on, because we'll talk about that again next time you're in. I can put my money on that. South China Morning Post calls for calm amid the chaos. Its entire front page is dedicated to the disruption in Hong Kong. It is shocking in many ways to see what was going on late Wednesday in Hong Kong, wasn't it?
It was shocking, but it also showed us something. It was first very peaceful demonstrations, and there were huge demonstrations. We had 1 million plus people Sunday on the streets, because they're really worried about this new extradition treaty to China, because that actually undermines the agreement that Hong Kong has with China for independence. And you can see China becoming more and more assertive. And let's be clear, this is very shocking. We don't hear any of this in China, but there are protests in China too. We just don't hear about it.
Let's now quickly move on, because I really want to get your take on this story on the front page of the Japan Times, because you've lived in and worked in Japan. You work in many Middle Eastern countries right now. You used to work for BP. You're the perfect person to give us your take on Shinzo Abe's 3-day visit to Iran. And they do have a very close ties. Japan, it's not continuing to export oil from Iran. It is, despite the sanctions from the United States.
It has 4.1 million barrels in April. I don't know what was in May. In March, it was 4.1% of the imports came.
Because in May, of course, beginning of May, the US said anyone who takes oil from Iran is breaching sanctions.
Because they had Japan had been given a waiver. Now they have very long, and Abe is going there to celebrate 90 years of diplomatic ties between Japan and Iran, and he's in a good position. He's close to Iran. Japan is also very close to Saudi Arabia, and Abe is close to Trump. So he's an ideal person to try and build a bridge here and tell the Iranians, don't ramp up your nuclear program as they threatened they would do, and maybe speak some reason to the Americans and to the Saudis.
So this could actually be helpful.
This could be very helpful.
Good news, especially as Japan is hosting the G20 summit at the end of this month.
Absolutely. And it comes in line with, it was interesting, you saw Mike Pompeo went to Germany. He also then spent 2 days, which is inordinate amounts of time, in Switzerland. And Switzerland represents the US in Tehran, which is why he could have those discussions too. So below the surface, there's a lot going on.
All right.
Hopefully for the better.
Okay, Cornelia, we have a minute to go, so you can talk about most meat in 2040 being not from animals, or leaves on the line and artificial intelligence.
Most meat not being from animals, because I was shocked when I read this story in The Guardian that 50% of all the crop we produce is actually fed to animals. So it is, the methane that the cows emit and so on is a big problem. So with us trying to get to zero emissions in 2050, with many countries trying to do that, obviously one of the low-hanging fruits is to eat less meat or no meat.
Are you a meat eater? Are you a flexitarian? Where are you?
I'm a meat eater, and I hunt, I shoot, and I stalk.
Okay. I love the fact that you're always so open and clear. We know where you are. You're a Remainer, and you, what did you say? You hunt and you shoot and you stalk.
All right. And I eat meat, but I think we should eat less meat.
Thanks, Cornelia. That is your briefing for today. I hope you have a really good day, whatever you're up to, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.